My father and mother were civil servants, very much into education, very much into legislation, because my father had a stint as a magistrate. He was, a Southern chief those days. We kept moving.
He was a child who was doodling, and then an uncle saw what he was doing. He mentions the word architecture, and it stuck in the mind of the youngster. He followed up on that, and when he was in high school, he knew that he was chasing his dream of becoming an architect. Today, we celebrate his story, and he allows us in the comfortable spaces of his home, a home that grids off much of what he's done in the professional world. There's sustainability, it's nature, and you can't believe that a home in the middle of the city has monkeys, has birds, and has a lot of beautiful tell the story of a sustainably living space.
I kind of appreciated architecture from different perspectives because it was never the same house. There was always movement. Sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, sometimes wider, settings different.
He's a baby boomer. You can stretch how far his story starts.
At a very early age, I enjoyed doodling, sketching, drawing. And one of my uncles is actually, apparently, he was the chairman of the Town and Country Planning Board. He noticed a few things among us. He used to visit us. And so he mentioned things like, this one can do architecture. So at an early age, I thought, hey, there's something called architecture. When, you're still in your formative years, primary, secondary school. Oh, and what happens? Then you dig in and you realize, it has a bit of engineering, a bit of design, and a bit of interesting things. So by the time I finished O-levels, by A-levels, I knew I wanted to be an architect. So I selected my subjects to suit that. Physics, chemistry, maths, and art, fine art. I had done also some woodwork and technical drawing, secondary level. So timber, materials, I had a feel for it also, going through school. So I understood a few things there. Generally, not really focused on buildings. So I studied at the Indian Institute of Technology in India when I finished my O-levels in mid-70s. I finished in 76, A-levels. And that time, 77, you remember the East African community broke up and all those things. And life was getting really hard in Uganda. And, any opportunity one would get to go away, you go. So I got the opportunity, I must say. And I did a 5-year course at the Indian Institute of Technology, where, again, I got very impressed with the standard they were at compared to us in technology. Because here at Makerere, at that point, they are only offering 3 branches of engineering: mechanical engineering, civil engineering, and electrical engineering. They didn't have anything like architecture there at Makerere or Kyambogo, anywhere in Uganda. In the whole region, it was only in Nairobi, with whom we had broken up because of EAD. Because of that collapse of the community. So I realized there are almost 20 branches of engineering, specifically for technology, set up by Jawaharlal Nehru, to raise the standards and industrialization technology of India. And it was the first Indian Institute of Technology, the first one. By the time I left, by the time I joined, 5 more had been created. And now there are 6 or 7. These are the elite schools of technology institutes. So I found a cross-section of students from India and abroad, Asia, Malaysians, somewhere my friends from, mostly Asian, and Africa. There were some from Sudan, from Kenya, from Malaysia, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Middle East, Lebanon, Iran, what. So I kind of found a very universal kind of community, and Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, philosophically quite open, which was good, I think, for me, for my reorientation. By the way, when I mentioned that I had been a civil servant, a child, servant's child, we were moving and interacting with different people. We interacted a lot with Kenyans and Tanzanians and others at an early stage. So that universal kind of sense only grew deeper or wider. So when I finished, I had to come back home, 83. I felt I had been away. I came here in 1980 for a brief stint, and Uganda that time was under the Tanzanian army, to be honest. They were stealing things. It was very uncomfortable. Well, I can't blame them. It's us. We have to work out our things. But what I'm saying is, I didn't feel very comfortable with the chaos. So I did come back for 3 years. When I came back, I was a bit lonely. I said, let me go back. Then I'll spring from there. Then fortunately, I got employment from Sentogo and Partners, who had met my head of department. So for me, I didn't really have to apply directly, because he had made a connection for me. And so when I knocked at I will call him a mentor, my mentor's office. Oh, yeah, I introduced myself. I said, oh, I had met your head of department. Oh, and so I had a soft landing, let me call it. And then after that soft landing, I still wanted more studies, and I think Uganda was not quite there in terms of, peace. So I applied for a master's, and he advised me to do urban design, urban planning, and So I went for it in Germany. Now the program in Germany was a very interesting one because it was connecting, again, the third world. So they'll give you an option to do your practical final year in a third world country. And I went to Ghana. So I spent a year in Ghana doing a project with the district planning and things. So when I came back, I now wanted planning because I thought planning is important guide for everything else. And that's how I got a job with the Sentogo's recommendation to be the head of planning for Masaka, Mbarara, and Arua, which had been devastated by the war of Amin. The dynamic, of course, at that time was a bit tricky for planning. The funding was not quite there. So I joined a private company, an American firm called Land Plan. Being an American firm company, had been created here because the Americans were coming back to settle. So they were reinstating themselves. So they were funding USAID big time. And they were funding cooperatives and so on. So we did a few projects which were very exciting, including, I must mention, the Uganda Cooperative Alliance on Nkrumah Road. That time it was the only serious building happening in town, because the others needed renovation. This one now required a little bit of remodeling and so on. That building was done with my hand in it. That's why the railing there is timber. So I did a bit of that. I worked with the Ghana Cooperative Alliance. We built 85 primary stores in Luero Triangle. Wamala, East Mengo, West Mengo. We were always on the road, designing on the road, contracting with local people, contractors and so on. A few Indians also. And we did the Wamala Union headquarters, restored it. So I did everything across architecture in terms of design, in terms of details, in terms of appointing contractors, supervising them, handing over, connecting here and there. I felt very confident I could run my own show. So fast forward, 1991, I set up ProPlan Partners, where I'm the founder and I'm still heading it. As ProPlan Partners, of course, it's difficult when you're setting your feet in the ground. We did quite a bit of work now. The problems of Luero had shifted to the north in terms of people being dispersed and so on. So we did 30 primary society stores in the north, Lira, Apache, and Gulu. And again, now this is in my own right, not under the American company, because now I had got the clientele. So I did some work with GTZ. GIZ that time was mainly in the health sector. So we did a few projects for health volunteers overseas, repair this, new setup there, headquarters, offices in Fort Portal and so on. The first 5 years or even more of ProPlan, we are easily getting jobs from these international agencies. Because I did work with I told you GIZ, that time it was GTZ. Huh? I did work with the Danida, COWI, and so on, which was industrial, commercial related. I did work with even DFID, the education sector. We designed the concept for primary classrooms in the country, and we are supervising people here and there. Then by and large, we started doing other bigger jobs. We did the NEMA headquarters on Ginger Road. We extended it by 2 floors and reset it, foundations and so on. We did the Ministry of Health, design is by us. Ministry of Foreign Affairs, headquarters, supervision is by us, Chinese funding. So we did a few public jobs until 2005. The competition for jobs became cutthroat in terms of PPDA. Have you heard of PPDA? PPDA, I didn't agree that architects should compete on cost. I think that should be a standard. That's what I still believe. But because it was the world over, it was not just a Uganda thing. It was affecting everywhere else. You know, previously, the profession was such that there was a kind of tier arrangement. There is a grade or classification. For this class, you do up to a certain fee. For this class, and this, you know, that kind of thing disappeared. Now the cheapest guy could take the job as long as he had some license. And so we started undercutting each other. And when you do that, somehow the sparkle, that extra dimension, the analysis I told you is lost because it's at cost. If I'm caught, too bad. But otherwise, let me bypass this one. Let me cut corners. So I stopped bidding for PPDA jobs. Now I started doing other jobs with the private sector. I've done jobs with I've done MTN, call center previously. Now it's like a mobile offices. I've done even the MTN headquarters is by us. So we did all that, all those phases. They were in phases. And if you go inside, you'll find a lot of landscaping, good landscaping with water bodies, fountains, and so. It looks different from the outside. You know, architecture is very interesting because you can work with concepts varying from metaphors, analogies, idealistic. You know, something looks like outside connected to the neighborhood, but inside is completely different. And I like that kind of concepts where you relate the outside with the rest, it's okay, but inside is dynamic and pleasing and so that's what we thought we could throw out there. Unfortunately, the clients were very much for it, very much actually into it. So it's a different dynamic inside. And I like projects like that. I try to do projects like that actually, so that you relate with the outside, but the inside you create the essence of that program. If the essence of the program is entertainment, make it exciting. If the essence is calmness and so on, hold it down with texture, with color, with what, you know? So that's what we do. And you cannot have a rate that this will apply for everybody. It doesn't make sense. There's no incentive. So I think first one, then I've also done a few projects which are private and small ones like my neighbor's office here, like some places now. We've recently done the BCR, as you go, before Wankoko there's a showroom, BCR. So a few other projects like that, scattered here and there. Some private ones like my Fort Motel, those I don't mention too much. Yeah, so in a nutshell, I've done, you can see, mostly architecture. And architecture in the sense of new, remodeling. By the way, there was a time when the word new construction was not acceptable by the funders. We went and supervised and analyzed the was it Cooperative Bank? That time, Cooperative Bank existed in Masaka and Arua and Barara. And we felt that it was not worthwhile. They had been bombed. It was not worthwhile remodeling it, rehabilitating it, refurbishing it. You know those words of World Bank. They like them for funding, even when it's not the case. So they said, no, you can pull it down, but don't use the title as whatever, as proposed new thing. No, it's rehabilitation of something. Because That was the, what was it, the theme, the mantra of the funders that time. So you can do new, but out there, the funders in New York don't want to see that. Uganda is not yet there. So we had issues like this. I think even the Minister of Health headquarters, on the drawings we had rehabilitation, not new. So very interesting. So like I was saying, we have done new, renovation, rehabilitation, remodeling, extensions, and they call for different approaches and caliber of people. Because there are people, even contractors, who are good at certain things and not others. What I'm finding now in Uganda is most contractors are really also cost. If you don't supervise them very well, there will be gaps. And they want new. Now we've lost touch of people who can do remodeling and things. They're not there. They want new, and they want concrete, again, materials. Most of our Ugandan contractors or builders are not good at steel structures. Like I told you, this one was done, erected quickly. But not many contractors can do it. They are not comfortable with timber either. They are comfortable with brick and mortar and concrete. And that's what you see everywhere. And sometimes it's very boring. When we copy and paste glass, sometimes cheap glass brings in too much glare. You can't see. Huh? Everyone is uncomfortable. So there are many challenges.
Who are the residents in the aquarium? There's fish. Have they lived that long?
No. There is one which has lived maybe 15 years, the catfish. But the goldfish, I replaced them. Sometimes they get sick. I have someone who maintains them for me, by the way. He comes regularly.
Yes, pets. You've not had the temptation to eat any of them?
You know, it's very interesting what happens. That catfish, when one of the fish gets sick and is dying, and is weak, it can't swim, it takes it, the catfish. I've learned a few things. The other thing is, because of the size of the aquarium, they can't grow too big because of the environment. So they are restricted to a small size. My service provider bought me a feeder, which feeds at intervals of 6 hours. The drops also regulated. So it's easier now, much, much easier. So these ones have lasted much longer than the older ones because now the food is there. When they would starve, the catfish would feast.
You were talking about the sustainability part of your space, because from the seats that where we are seated now are made out of natural materials, the wooden floor. We look at the aquarium. Outside, the nature is flourishing.
Even solar, we depend very much on solar lighting and solar heating. You'll see some panels behind there.
Is it intentional? Is it something that speaks to you?
Very, very, very deliberate. I had started to mention that besides my background, which I would say was a mix of, I would say semi-urban, Fort Portal is semi-urban, and rural. I'm naturally drawn to nature and space and feelings of kind of having that freedom. You know, freedom from being dependent on service providers and regular, whatever, maintenance. So I've always liked the timber aspect in a house, and actually even bricks. I like them in a house better than concrete blocks for some reason based on the background also. But more importantly, I did my master's training back in the 1980s in Germany. And the Germans were the forerunners of the sustainability and especially energy efficiency concept. So I trained in that direction of sustainability, conservation, energy efficiency, of course, in all the aspects, including not just the aspects of just a make-believe thing, but also in terms of the social dimension. You know, if you use local materials, local artisans, local experience, it helps actually, inevitably. You cut out a big carbon footprint component. In fact, I walk to my office. My office is near, and I don't walk straight through this dust. I walk through the back. Those are all elements of carbon footprint. I moved my office from Clement Hill, Nakasero, down to Kololo, Archer Road, and for the last nearly 10 years, I got closer to Bugolobi so that I don't have to drive too much. And those are all components that I think make life also easier, let's face it, in the long run, because you're not spending unnecessarily. I've tried to use that even in some of the projects I've done, especially where I have an influence. Or influence meaning even where I can convince a client that you might put a little bit more capital up front, but in the long run, the operations and maintenance you'll save. For example, the easiest one I can give you is that in Kampala, the payback period for most of these water heaters, solar, because of our sun here, Kasese would be even better, or the north. The payback period here for that solar heater was 4 years. Payback. You've put the money up front, but after 4 years, you've got everything back, and the rest of your life is almost free, unless someone cracks it or something goes terribly wrong. At least 20 years you can go. And like you've gone here many years now. We have tried also to do things related to conservation. Like my residence, all the timber for the ceiling, for the floor, for those elements you saw, the cottages, is from the estate. It's from the estate. And the people I've worked with are local. They are the artisans I've worked with over time. We've trained each other. We've learned from each other. And we have developed something that is uniquely ours. So that's, I think, the beauty with taking a route with thinking more, I would say, holistically, you know, about everything. There's even the dynamic of change of user, where, you know, eventually you want to break it down. So do you need to over-partition? Why not have a more open space? Because then you can change as you go and adjust things. And that's, you never really find an ideal situation. But for me, here, I even got an ideal situation. An advantage, you see, I told you in Fort Portal I could use timber from there. But here, of course, Kampala doesn't have timber. So you have to bring timber from elsewhere. But here, Kampala has steel. At least you saw my Doshi signboard there. Doshi is a steel company. It's just down the road here. So in extending this house, this floor you see here, you see this deck and the entire floor up. There's no concrete there except a small slab of 50 millimeters, 2 inches for us of the imperial system. 2 inches, because the rest of it is just steel joists, high sections, with a sheet, corrugated sheet. Foundations were fairly firm. In the old days, there was strict supervision and building control. We checked with my engineer, no problem. The only thing we needed to add in order to support that deck were 3 columns. Those 3 columns are embedded in, you can't even see them. I alone know from my drawings and my experience. I've done this here. I've done it at Fort Motel, one of the buildings, which was, I think, staff quarter. I converted it I added the floor for conferencing. Just the same way, I've done it at my residence in the village, and a few people who consult me deeply. It requires a lot of attention to detail, which aspect many people are not skilled at, unfortunately. Because people can copy and paste, but it's not just that simple. Because all these things I've told you that you add this, there's more than that. Because on that sheet, you have to weld some pieces to hold that layer of concrete. You have to do a few details. But that's the secret of our profession. Because that's why we come in. You can go ahead with your things the way you want, but the life might not be as durable.
By extension, your home seems to bring out the architecture in you. If you are to speak to someone today, or if you are to do it all over again, what would you change about your home and why?
Like I said, any project requires programming. I told you when I moved here, I was a bachelor with my brother. We were 2 bachelors. So the program then was different. You get it? Actually, the house was big. 3 bedrooms, we were 2. Programming, of course, has to do also with the site. The site now is not the site then, although the site analysis, it requires beyond what is physical. It requires even the street and the noise and the what, and the neighborhood, and how they are set out. Because you have to design a form that can withstand the elements and the conditions around you. So these things have changed. But with the architectural knowledge, you can project sometimes and say, this area is developing towards this direction. Sometimes the planners, I'm a planner, but I'm not operational as a planner. I only operated for 1 year as a planner, actually. I was a planner for Reconstruction and Development Corporation. Mbarara, Arua, and Masaka, the headquarters. Way back in 1988, when I came back. But then I found planning a bit boring, given how you have to maneuver around politicians and, and so many stakeholders. It was too much of a headache when you don't have proper instruments of authority. That's one of the things we need to underline, where people are not coming to bypass you or to do things without rationale, without clear policy. Apparently this is still officially a residential zone, but practically, you have seen, it has first very quickly changed into a commercial zone.
You've lived in this place for 30 years. Yes. 34 years. And you say that it was originally a residential place, but right next door is Bandari Rise, lined with these bars, restaurants. What has been the changing character, the morphing character of Bugolobi from the years that you've stayed there?
Bugolobi was back then for civil servants. Originally, it was for civil servants. That's why there was this housing estate. The policy of privatization, by which I came to Bugolobi to buy this house, meant that they are moving from public to private. That in itself meant that these families, which were originally quite segmented, in fact, our chairman here has lived here since the 60s. There were clear families living here, public, of a certain caliber. Even the housing was classified into different grades. People of caliber A, scale B, and C were moving in areas A, B, C, like that. That's how it worked. And so, of course, the planning that time was kind of universal. Over the years, firstly, the privatization meant now those families are not here. Now instead, you have anybody. It can be a bachelor, an individual, which was very rare before. It can be a group of people. It can be anybody. No clear-cut social, you can say, representation. And with that, because of the mixed bag nature and so on, the private people, of course, are more driven by profit. They're not driven by these, social, community-related things, no. The guy comes here, he wants profit. He probably wants to add more rooms to rent. Now others have even converted it, bought it, and extended the bungalows to high-rise buildings. We have them around us now, like you have seen in Kololo. So it gets more and more mixed. And of course, even racially. Now we have people from all corners of the world. When I take my walks in the afternoon, I see Chinese, I see Indians, I see Europeans, I see everyone. We are all here. different cultures. You know, I told you some people like dogs, some don't like dogs, some. Now it has become even more complicated. People are into entertainment, big time. I think it has to do with certain attractions. So if I was to do it again, I would not do it for residents. Now I feel for people who spend 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, driving their children to schools. Because our planning, you see, planning has to go hand in hand with development. You can't have development ahead of planning, then it's a bit difficult. The old neighborhoods, the planning I studied, you have to cater for certain thresholds of population accordingly and age group. If there are people of a certain age group, old people, you need to provide them with parks, slow down, walkways, and space like that. You zone it properly. If there are children, you need, up to a certain age, you need nursery. Up to a certain age, primary school, within a neighborhood of 15 minutes drive. So every sector must have a hierarchy. Housing, you know, what we sometimes call low-cost housing. Sometimes low-cost housing is really medium housing, depending on the standards you have set. And the family structures. You know, in Africa here, we have big family structures. In other places, they have smaller. I've seen Asians, even in a house like this, you can have 20 people living there. You know, I'll tell you something very interesting about Germany. Unlike America, you know, in US, everyone's dream is to own a house. In Germany, no. The majority of the people do not own houses. They move as their dynamic changes. When I'm a working person, maybe I marry someone who is from a certain point to there, another city, I move to what is convenient for both of us, or midway, or whatever. And when we get children, we look around, what are the best schools for kindergarten, nursery nearby, close to work, la, la, la. And you can move. When you grow older, you can move to another place, Entebbe. So that dynamic, unfortunately, we don't quite have it. Here in Uganda, most people in the middle income, not even middle only, even lower income, in the cities here, we have 2 homes, minimum. We have the home in the city and the home in the country. So when we are doing planning here in Kampala, you can do it differently from what we are trained to do in Europe and other places. Even Europe has changed. In the past, you'd design planning with a symmetry, for example. Now in much of Western Europe, they do incineration because the symmetries have become very expensive. You have to pay a lot of money for you, then maybe for your family, you buy plots in advance and all that. It's complicated. Now they do it in certain places here. I've seen a lot of my Tanzanian friends. When they've moved from Kigoma or from Bukoba to Dar es Salaam, the capital, the primate capital. After years there, 20 years, maybe they've married from another corner. They settle there. And so when the time comes, that's their home, the one home they have. Here in Kampala, nation from low to highest, Ugandans. The cemeteries we don't plan anymore. Hardly. They're not needed because people will always have their second home. So you need to understand also the culture and also to understand that the culture changes because inevitably even this one will change. I believe, and I've done an analysis, the houses in urban settings should not be single-storied. It's a waste of a lot of space. They can be double, triple-storied at good cost, at reasonable, at good cost. But people don't understand it. So that's one challenge we have in terms of the concepts. Because the land is fixed, 1. 2, not all land is intended to be developed for housing. Land like swampy land, those wetlands that we have taken all over, everywhere now, the wetlands are gone. They're being filled by the night, illegally, because it's going to be very costly to have a proper foundation there. But also, you're working there to start competing with other elements of the ecosystem, including mosquitoes. When I'm on a high point, that's why Mzungus never settled on those lowlands. They will be at Kololo, Nakasero, up, Vugolobi, up. Down there, Namuongos and Kamo Chaz, Kifumbira places and so on. Those are for the workers who would come to work for them. They don't go there. Why? They are going for what? Mosquitoes. And suffer with the construction. So planning means that you set all these things in a certain way, certain order, with knowledge, not just haphazardly. Then you know where to place what and project what will happen when and how you'll cater for it. Things like road infrastructure, very important. So for example, when you have a planner who thinks two-dimensionally, which most of our planners here do, because they've only studied geography before they are planning or before they are masters. They've done geography. Now geography is two-dimensional. Engineering, architecture, particularly architecture, engineering I'm talking civil, architecture is three-dimensional physically. Sometimes we call it four-dimensional when you add time on other factors, which means that there are certain things intended for certain spaces. When I look at connections or connectivity, I look at above the ground, on the surface, and below. There's a lot that goes on under there in terms of drainage. If you go to a more developed society, subways are there. You can have all the services down there. So that on the surface, you meet something that is pleasing to the eye, that is inspiring, because that's what you see. Down there is movement. Let it happen. Let things be developed. Some of those things which used to amaze me back then in the 80s in Germany is the center of a city, because it's a commercial hub. Top priorities for people working. The cars, you park it somewhere. You come in through maybe a tram or something which can be noticed for the public. Those private things, you leave them there. Now, then you ask the question, how are the deliverables done? They're done at night. These vans which can deliver. They do it at night, sort yourself out. By the time X to time Y, that is only for this purpose. And it can be done. And then, of course, the flyovers. You are driving through flyovers. Like here, we have nice hills. You can have communication going on up there properly, neatly. Not these cables we see everywhere and sightly to the eye. You have communication up there. People down there are playing golf. Why do you think we have Nakasero golf, Lugogo for recreation? So that you don't put much load, dead load over high-rise structures on the ground that is not farm, wetlands. So you have recreation, and it can work. You want to connect, you can go overboard and connect the places, and people stay there doing their thing. And these things, when you start imagining them, they can work, except we probably are not sensitive enough to think about them, because you must have that other fourth dimension of time, that it will catch up with you. You think you have it here. Right now, you are here. In the next 10, 20 years, this dynamic here will have changed. You should have the foresight to control it and manage it, rather than be overtaken by events, because that's the challenge. And it's a big challenge for our fraternity. And it's deeply a factor here because we have the planning, but enforcement is complicated. Kenya, they also have the Akavio, but at a larger scale, sometimes better than us. And TZ, different. And so anyway, that's what I can say. But if you look at Uganda in particular, Kampala is a prime city. It's such a huge magnet that the internal migration of Uganda is probably higher than the rest, because it's such a magnet. Everything happens here. If we find some growth poles, like Jinja was an industrial growth pole, Entebbe was administrative, Gulu can be something else, Mbarara, and so Hoima is now becoming a growth pole. Then you kind of reduce the pressure on Kampala. This is because of this pressure that people have to find accommodation in lowlands with no sanitation. Can you imagine? And all this, but you're not going to stop people unless you create a reason for them not to converge, because everyone converges to Kampala from east, west, north, south, mostly. can change it, the dynamic. Not easy. I can't say it's easy. It's very difficult.
Just like the chef will take you to their kitchen, show you how they put together a sumptuous meal, today Mr. Mugamba takes us around his house for us to appreciate the soul of his project, the passion that he puts into his private living space. Let's go around, look at the beauty here and the things that he says are very intimate to him. Welcome to his home.
This wall was straight. But being straight meant, you see, it was straight up to that slab. Meant that I could not take my cars through. So I chamfered it here. I removed that corner and created this space and removed the garage, because this was the garage. Now this garage is our music space for the children. This is where they do their work, their homework and TV, and so this is a space now for them, the children. It's kind of a bit of a family room. There's another family room up for the adults. So that's how we created this space and eliminated the idea of garage, put carports behind comfortably, and reshaped the house. Now, because we had reshaped this house with that chamfer, I did more chamfers. So I did another chamfer here to make it feel like an original concept. So it kind of is chamfered here. You can see the corner there. And so I made some modifications because of those changes. So these windows were originally casement windows. So we made them timber windows. And I changed the floor also to timber. This timber floor you can see is more than 25, it's about 25 years old, more than 25. Changed it in the last century, 1999. So created a more a softer kind of environment, warmer on the floor and also the ceiling, so that when you are here, you really feel you've left the view of the street. So as you can see here, I borrowed some light from there to light up this space. I created this because this was originally a room. You know the old standard rooms, there was a corridor here, straight through. So it was dark, very dark. So I opened it up here, borrowed some light from there. Then here even I created this recess so that you can borrow some light from here, from the outside. And recesses, so you don't have a boring corridor kind of setup. You can see the steel now here, clad with the timber. There's steel below there. And you just need to stand up to see everything there and just step out here to see everything here. 2 steps, I will see this entrance, another, and I can see the other main one. And I can stay. If I want to greet someone who is just entering, I just go to the terrace. Now let me take you to the terrace. So I've seen you, and I want to welcome you. And I just step out here. Now you can see even more. I can receive you from the gate there. And as you enter here, and I can ask you, come up and find me here. So those who come up to find me here sometimes use the back stairs. My neighbor here, sometimes we greet each other from here. You know, it's part of neighborhood. And surveillance. There's both neighborhood and surveillance. We greet each other here. He sits out here. Hello. Now I'm going to tell him, I'm happy with the way you are doing your windows. You can see this is new. He's renovating. Very happy. My neighbor there, the senior lady, he sits in that window. You see that window? That's where she sits. That's her window. So I can say, Kulu, and we connect. From here, I don't see much of the road or the factory. So I can comfortably settle around. I realized one thing, when we have a gathering here, very often the elderly people stay down there. The young people like it here. Young meaning the Gen Zs. They like to chill out here because for them, the noise is not a big deal and they like to get more exposure. So I find it very interesting how people zone out their spaces according to the age groups and different generations. The children, meanwhile, like it at the back because there's activity. They can play basketball, they can swim, they can play ping pong, and there's different kind of setup. So it's You can create spaces which attract, different age groups, different, even personalities. People want a little bit more quiet, they stay inside, down there. So, and that's the job and responsibility of an architect, to be able to understand the needs beyond what you are told. Now you can see my little canopy here, the one I was talking about. Now you can see it better, by the way. The final extension. I did one extension the year 2000. I wanted to enter the millennium with a different feel. Yeah. Then 2011, I did the final extension. So it's like every 10 years almost. Now it's the shrinking I need. But this extension is 2011, 14 years ago. So behind there are the domestic staff units. You have shower rooms for the swimming, laundry there, and some little space behind there. Down here is a playroom for the children. That door you see there. You have to relate with your neighbor, because my neighbor's staff comes here. So now if you are too Western in your culture, individualistic, you make life difficult. Even for yourself, So that's why I think it helps when you
connect.
yeah, and share even ideas. Huh? Why should I have a neighbor who is a doctor and my children are sick? Or why should I have engineering challenges when my neighbor is an engineer?